Hi, everyone. Welcome to the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, Northern Virginia chapter. I am Carla Conley, co-chair for the Health Committee. We also have on a call Dr. Kiana Trent, who is our chair. And I first want to read a disclaimer. This presentation was prepared or accomplished by the presenters in their personal capacity. The opinions expressed during this presentation are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women Partners, affiliates, or any entities they represent. Tonight we have an event. It is titled How Mental Health Impacts Our Physical Health. We have featured speakers, Dr. Register Haley, and also we have Clara Marshall. Dr. Carrie Register Haley is the founder and CEO of Investment Coaching in Alexandria, Virginia. She is a certified professional coach from Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. Her niche is executive and leadership development coaching, and her approach is rooted in re-energizing, re-empowering, and rediscovering a passion for what you want to accomplish. Dr. Register Haley has a PhD in general psychology, master's in human relations, and many other certifications. She also served nearly 21 years on active duty in the U.S. Army before retiring as a Personnel Chief Warrant Officer 3. She is also the author of The Best Investment is Within Oneself, second edition, available on Amazon. We also have guest speaker Clara A. Marshall. She is a behavioral health clinical supervisor with the Fairfax Falls Church Community Services Board. She has over 20 years of employment with the county and has held multiple positions in social services, substance abuse, and mental health, providing counseling to children, adults, and families. She holds a bachelor's in psychology, master's in public health, and professional counseling. She is a licensed professional counselor, certified substance abuse counselor, qualified mental health professional, and a qualified mental health case manager. She is also the founder and CEO of Spiritual Journey Counseling Services. Her passion is mentoring and empowering youth and families. She is motivated and giving back to African-American communities and inspiring change for youth and families. We thank you all for joining. Please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A section of the chat. And next up, we have speaker Dr. Register Haley.
All right, good evening, everyone. Let me get my slides up here so we can get started. To share my screen. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, good evening, everyone. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I realize that this is on a Monday evening and everybody is just now getting back from work and trying to settle back into your own family life. So welcome to this discussion. As stated before, we would like for individuals to participate. We don't want to just talk. We would like for participation. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Before we get started, I do want to make a disclaimer that anytime we talk about self-care, anything that has to do with mental health, there could be a potential for someone to get triggered. So I did put the information at the bottom of this first slide in case something triggers you or something comes up for you and that you need to talk to someone. The suicide hotline number is 1-800-273-TALK or 8255. And then the MHA, you can also text 741 to get a trained counselor on the crisis hotline to have a discussion if needed. So please don't hesitate to reach out if in case something has triggered you during this conversation. And you can also put it in the chat if you need some assistance, and one of us will get to you immediately. I said all of that to say this. Again, I just want to remind everyone that there is, in case someone gets triggered, that we have the 1-800-273-TALK or 8255 available. If something triggers you, please don't hesitate to reach out for help. Or you can also text 741-741 to get a trained counselor on the crisis hotline to assist you in case you feel triggered. I also want to make sure that we understand what we're having a conversation about tonight. We're talking about good mental health begins with self-care. My portion of this is to speak about self-care and self-care plan or self-care management. Mental health is something that all of us have. Everybody has some form of mental health. Either you have great mental health because you are practicing self-care and you are managing yourself well, or you could be at the other end of the spectrum, somewhere in between there. You could be at the point where you need to pay more attention to your mental health, or you could be experiencing mental illness. We will not be discussing in-depth mental illness. We will touch on it, but we will not be discussing that tonight, at least not in my portion of it. So I just wanted to make sure that we're clear about that. What mental health is, it includes the emotional, psychological, and social well-being of individuals. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It determines how we handle stress, relate to others, and make our choices. Mental health is important also at every phase of life. That includes childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, and adulthood. Sometimes I think that individuals may lose sight of that children have mental health needs and that they should also have a good self-care plan. And that might be incumbent on the adult in their life to help them to create good self-care plans for the children. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Over the course of each one of our lives, we might experience some kind of mental health issue. It might impact our mood, our thinking, our behaviors could be affected by it. Many factors can also contribute to mental health issues that we experience. Those could be biological factors such as genes, or chemical, brain chemical, life experiences such as trauma, abuse, those can impact it. Family history of mental health issues can also impact the way that we see our mental health or deal with it. So again, everyone has mental health. Not everyone has mental issues. So we need to make sure that we make the distinction there. I like this comment by Brene Brown, who talks about a lot about vulnerability. She has a lot of podcasts and different things of that nature. She has a plethora of books that are out, and she's really great. She's out of the University of Houston. She says, a deep sense of love and belonging is irresistible, is an irresistible need of people. We are biologically, cognitively, physically, and spiritually wired to love, to be loved, and to belong. When those needs are not met, we don't function as we are meant to. We break, we fall apart, we numb, and we ache, or we hurt, we get sick. So that's why it's critical for us to understand mental health, how it plays into our day-to-day, and the things that we should be doing to take better care of it. Humans are made for connection and relationships. Research has shown that positive outcomes of our overall health, such as connectivity in our relationships, our culture at work, at home, in the community, are impacted when we have good self-care plans in place. So the objective of what I'm going to talk about specifically, and Sister Clara will talk about the impacts of it on the body later, but I'm going to talk about how to clarify self-care and to provide an overview of options to improve individual and organizational self-care options. We'll define it. We'll look at some of the distressors that come along with mental health, how to incorporate it, not just in our own personal space, but in our workspace as well as school, because that is critical too. How to create a self-care plan, looking at some counseling services when our self-care plans are not all up to speed and maybe don't serve us well, what counseling services are available, and then how to create some daily reminders to help us to keep our mental health intact. So I want to start out by talking about, this is a compass that I like to look at, and it comes from the healthcare community. It's compassionate, resilient, resiliency toolkit that comes from the healthcare community. And it talks about the different components of self-care, which include the heart, the spirit, the strength, and the mind. From the heart perspective, when we look at it, we think about the good communication that contributes to developing healthy relationships at work, at home, at school, within the community. Those are all critical. Among these key skills are necessary for communication, but listening and being a part of the community, we look at what the body language shows, empathy, how we attach empathy to relationships, but also how our emotions show up in our different relationships. Strong emotional health supports relationships. It is good. It is a very important part of our overall well-being. The way that we are able to manage or regulate our own emotions and the way that we are able to receive emotions that are provided by other people is a critical part of how we are able to manage our self-care. In other words, we seek to have emotions to serve our well-being rather than to allow our emotions to overwhelm us. When we learn how to practice things like mindfulness, we are able to better respond to situations more compassionately, not just to other people, but to ourselves. It is important for our relationships and emotional regulation that we not only are valuable to our connection to ourselves, but to the people around us. A healthy relationship is one that demonstrates a good compassion, but also good emotional regulation. So in other words, what I'm saying is self-awareness is critical and emotional regulation is critical to our self-care. So we have to be mindful of that. And so these might be some areas that you're already aware of, but maybe you just haven't really been practicing well. So maybe take a step back and look at the relationships that you currently have, how it's impacting our heart, because we often lead with our heart or we learn with our heart. And then how we are attaching emotions and how we're allowing emotions to impact us and how our emotions are impacting other people. The other area that we want to look at is the part of strength or spirit, is the core values that go along with that, as well as rest and play, because those are also another component to having a good self-care plan. Core values, if we don't understand what our own core values are, then oftentimes that can be a disruptor, right? So when you look at core values, like I value love, trust, honesty, when I understand what those are for myself, then I understand when they are being maybe violated or in conflict. If somebody's not honoring those, then I might have an issue. So understanding that what my core values are is critical to me understanding how to better care for myself. That goes along with understanding rest and play. So how do I best rest? How do I best rest myself so that I am at my best self, that my authentic self automatically shows up? If I don't understand what is a reset moment for me, in other words, how I reset myself in order so that my best self shows up, then that can be an issue or a problem for other people. And along with that, we also look at play. What do I do to de-stress or let go of some of the things that are not serving me well in play? And so we're going to look at other areas that we can put things in place to create a good self-care plan to address that. Next is strength. Strength encompasses stress resilience as well and care for the body. Stress resilience allows us to maintain presence in the moment. When we encounter inevitable stresses in our daily living, if we understand what stress resilience is, then we can incorporate that into our daily self-care plans. And how do we embody that? Becoming stress resilient and caring for our bodies sometimes also needs additional help. So we might have to ask for someone to come in to help us to manage that or to set up our own self-care plan. And then the mind is also another area. Balance between home and work is critical. And balance is a tough word to use sometimes, because I think that we also need to realize that maybe balance is not what is needed, but it might be harmony. And I say the difference between those two is harmony says that I have a lot going on at work. And so I have to do more at work right now. And so it might be out of what other people consider out of balance, but I'm considering what I need to do at work and maybe not focus so much at home. Or I might have a lot of things going on at home right now, and I need to spend more of my energy there. And maybe it might appear to other people that it's out of balance with what my work priority is. So in the mind, we create harmony or balance in order to care for ourselves better. And then the last thing I would say about that is organizational skills. Staying organized and decluttering our physical space along with our mental space is another way that we keep the mind in balance or in check. A lot of times I know when I'm out of balance or when I'm not, my harmony is not there, is based on how my house looks. If my kitchen table has stuff all over it, something that is out of alignment for me. If the car is all messy, something is out of alignment for me. So in order for me to get my mind back in balance and be able to focus and be mentally present for things, I have to get those spaces back into order. Finding harmony or balance between work, community commitments is critical to self-care so that you don't get burnt out. And I want to foot stomp this as well, especially for people who do a lot in the community. If you're doing a lot with your church or your sororities or your fraternities, or even with other community service, a lot of times we can put a lot of emphasis on those things and everything else becomes out of balance or there's no harmony there. So we need to be mindful of those things as well when we start to look at what is critical for our self-care plan. Is there any questions before I go on? I don't want to rush through this.
No, no questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. So here, now that we understand the 4 different components of what self-care incorporates, or the compass of self-care incorporates, how do we weave that into not just into our home life, but how do we weave that into our work or our school day? And the reason why I think it's so important because of everything that's going on in the world with COVID, with the mass shootings that we are seeing on a regular basis now, which is unfortunate, with job loss, with all of the things, gas rising, the prices of gas rising. How do we weave what we know about creates a good self-care plan into our work environment and our school environment? Because we have to remember that other people are experiencing things just like we are. And so if we don't understand how our self-care may get out of tolerance at just with ourselves and at home, then and not how to bring that or envelop that into what is happening in our work and school spaces, then we might be shortchanging ourselves. So a couple of things that I like to consider when we think about weaving self-care into school and work environments is number one is to be compassionate, be self-compassionate. At work, sometimes I know we can get to a space where the conversations of other people or the negativity of other people can impact the way that we are feeling present in the moment, but also how we display our emotions towards other people. So we need to practice self-care. And one of the things that Christian Neff, who is the co-founder of the Center of Mindful Self-Compassion, says is that the same way that we find compassion for other people when they didn't do things so well or they're going through different situations, the way that we encourage them or that we cheer them on, that same compassion we need to reserve for self as well. Because if we don't learn how to be compassionate with ourselves, we have a tendency that we can start to get inside of our head and it can mess with our mental state, our mental environment. And so we need to be mindful of that. We don't need to always have a stiff upper lip and say, well, this happens to everybody, or I suck at this, or I'm not going to get the job because my interview was horrible. Maybe what we need to do is learn how to reframe that and provide some compassion for self and say, yeah, you didn't do so great at this one. The next one you will, or the next one you can be more prepared for. So learning how to practice self-compassion is one thing that we can weave into our regular work day. If we didn't turn in a project on time, don't beat ourselves up, don't overjudge ourselves for what happened and that we cannot change back then. What can we change going forward? How can we improve that? That's a good way to practice self-care in the work and school environment. Maybe your child didn't get a great grade on their test, and beating them up about it is not going to fix it. So figuring out how to show some compassion in those situations can also be a way to weave self-care into situations. And a lot of adults right now are in school, back in school themselves. So understanding how to weave that in. The other one is to honor your social tendencies. I know that since we've been in COVID, a lot of us have been working from home almost full time and have had very little interaction with other people. For a lot of extroverts and some introverts, that can be debilitating because you don't have that social interaction with other people. And so the ability to honor your social tendencies can be challenging. One of the ways that the Health Coach Institute provides as far as honoring your self-care through social interaction is maybe scheduling a regular phone call to touch base with someone, a family member. Hosting a game night with your friends can also be a great way to honor your social tendencies. Practicing it also with a caveat that they're practicing good health care COVID protocols to make sure that everyone is still safe. Going on a date night with a significant other or with your spouse, and learning how to cuddle with a furry friend, writing a card and mailing it to a loved one, someone who's sick and shut in, a veteran, someone who is not receiving mail. Those are good ways to honor your social tendencies. But honoring your social tendencies also could mean the opposite. It doesn't always mean to interact with other people. Maybe what is honoring your social tendencies might be taking a step back and looking at the relationships that you currently have in your life that are no longer serving you. If there's someone who is draining your energy, being around a friend or a family member, maybe it might be time to say that this is not honoring me well or not serving me well, and maybe having to distance yourself from that relationship and finding more uplifting relationships that do not provide a drain on you. Also, what we could do is look at celebrating your accomplishments. This is another way to weave it into the day. Celebrating even at home your small wins. A child cleans up their room, celebrate that. I learned how to cook a new meal, learn how to celebrate that. Celebrate when you get a project in on time. Learning how to celebrate those small wins is another way to weave that in because it boosts your endorphins and your happy, feel-good emotions by actually celebrating things. On the other end of that is counteracting negativity. Learning when if someone's bringing some negative energy into your spaces, which is what I talked about a little bit earlier when we talked about social tendencies, is learning how to move negative energy out of your space. If you're engaging with someone who brings in a lot of negativity, maybe you just don't need to answer their calls, or maybe start to separate yourself from them. Don't allow that negative energy to hijack you. Or being able to reframe when someone says something negative to you at work or at home or in a social setting, being able to reframe that into something that is more positive. For example, a lot of people get caught up in, am I verified on social media? On social media, when somebody says a negative comment about an individual, they get caught up on that, maybe that one negative comment as opposed to all of the other positives comments that they already received. So learning to separate yourself from the negativity and not allowing it to hijack you is also a good way to practice self-care. It is detrimental to your relationships, to your health, and to your happiness. So be mindful of that when you entertain negative people or negative situations. The other one is recharge and reboot. Learning to step all the way away from work, taking breaks from work, not only for vacation, but also maybe during the day, getting up and taking a walk around the block before you respond to a negative email or someone's inquiry about something. Learning to step away and recharge and reboot before answering is critical. It is not simply enough for you to take time off of work. We need to actively take time off, disconnect in order to reap the benefits of the time that we are taking off. At home, close the office door. If you have a office set aside at home, which a lot of people do now because of COVID, a lot of times we allow our work to blend into the rest of the day. Because in studies have already shown, I read an article from Forbes and Harvard that said that many people work longer hours since COVID because they don't have to commute. So they will sit at their computer and they will continue to work into the evening, which automatically bleeds over into your family time and your social time. And so there's no cutoff for the engagement. That impacts your self-care or your management of your self-care plan. So being mindful of how you recharge and how do you reboot and totally separate yourself so that you can relax, de-stress, so that when you come back, that you're refreshed and you're ready to go. And it's easier to appoint someone else to be responsible for the work when you're not in the office so that you can have that full time to recharge and reboot. The other thing is to create an inspiring work place and learning place for yourself. Hang nice pictures up, the things that make you happy, the things that energize you. Hang that in your workspace or in your school space. If your child is a virtual learner and they're working from home, having a desk in a corner that faces a wall is not inspiring. So find things that can inspire energy or energize your child and hang them up in their space. Create that space that makes them want to be there, want to engage, and want to learn. That is a part of creating a good self-care plan in your workspace and at home. In at school. You also want to look for yourself. What inspires you? What can I hang in my space? I can tell you my space has a picture of a beach. It always has a picture of a beach in some shape, form, or fashion because I'm working for my next vacation. That's my mindset. I'm working for my next vacation. So how do I keep that inspiration going on a regular basis? Creating that, weaving that into the everyday life that you live is another way to incorporate your self-care plan. Any questions before I go on?
Yes, we actually have a couple of questions. The first question is there a cure for mental health issues?
I think that I would need more context to that. And so when we're talking about mental health issues, are we talking about mental illness? Because you can, and I was trying to stay away from mental illness tonight and really just to talk about mental health. But with mental illness, that requires a trained mental health practitioner or provider in order for you to receive the care that you need. And it needs to be somebody who's certified, someone who can do a diagnosis. And so that is different than mental health, which is what we're talking about tonight. And also with mental illness, a lot of people can receive services from a licensed provider and they can get better. Not everybody can be weaned off of medication, but a lot of people do get better and actually experience a full recovery. Clara, would you like to weigh in on this one?
So good evening, everyone. And yes, indeed, there are treatment modalities that can help you decrease like some of your symptoms and some of the signs of a mental illness. And for instance, if you have anxiety, there are like treatment modalities as well as medication treatments that can help ease some of the anxiety. It can decrease your anxiety. It can decrease levels of stress. And then, of course, it has to be in order to, if you have a mental health illness, then you want to work with a licensed provider or a practitioner, as Dr. Carrie Haley stated. And sometimes it does require some medication treatment, and that could be psychiatry. It also can be your it can be your PCP, your family practitioner, and as well as other nurse practitioners who are in the field of psychiatry and mental health. And so maybe that is, I would refer an individual who is interested in that form of treatment to Psychology Today. And when you go to Psychology Today, you can look up practitioners and you can put in like your address and your zip code, and it will provide you a list of practitioners that are in your area. In addition, it will also provide you a list of practitioners who receive your healthcare insurance, as well as those who may take, who are pay out of pocket, to allow you to pay out of pocket. Many of them have sliding scale fees, as well as there's a list of like, if you call your healthcare insurance, they will give you a list of practitioners who are in network.
Yes, thank you, Sister Clara. And at the end of my presentation, I have a list of links for resources that you can click on and get that information as well. I think they're going to drop it in the chat and also on the Facebook for those who are viewing on Facebook. But there are a plethora of resources out there. That is not the area that we are focusing on for this session tonight. I just want to make sure that we are all clear. All right. Any other questions, Sister Carla?
So we do have two other questions, but they were based around mental health illness and issues. So I will just not read it, or if you want, I can read it and you can decide if you want to answer. Okay. So the next question is, if something seems off, how can we tell if someone is having a mental health issue breakdown? Are there any signs?
Okay, so I'm going to talk about some distressors in a couple more slides, and Sister Clara is going to address some on her presentation as well. So I think we're going to get to that question in particular. Is there another one, Sister Clara?
Well, the last one is that, are there any racial groups that are prone to mental illness? And then that was the last one.
So I think we're going to get to that one as well. So I'm glad that we have a lot of interest in this and that you are asking questions, because a lot of times our inability to have access to information is one of the things that keeps us from asking the questions. And sometimes it is because we don't see someone who looks like us and that can understand what we're maybe going through at the moment, that we're afraid to ask. And that goes back to stigma, and I'll address stigma in a little bit too. Anything else? Sister Clara?
Not at this time.
All right. So now that we understand the 4 components for mental self-care, and we've talked a little bit about some of the things that we can do at work and how we can incorporate that at work and also in school, let's talk about how we can create our own self-care plan or our own self-management. And there are a lot of things that we can do. And so please don't take this as a full gospel or these are the only things you can do, because for each person, it is personalized, right? So what may work for me may not work for you. So you have to know yourself. And that's why when I talked about earlier, when I talked about what are your core values, what you value, what brings purpose into your life, what does that look like for you? It also helps you to devise this plan that you're going to do to have good self-care. One of the things that I often say is good sleep hygiene is at the core of good self-care. Because if we don't get any sleep, think about what happens when you don't sleep. You're groggy, you're angry, sometimes you are you can be frustrated, annoying to other people, emotionally insensitive sometimes. It can impact you almost like a drug. So if you've ever seen somebody who's been sleep deprived, sometimes they seem like they're in a fog or in a funk because they haven't had sleep. So good sleep hygiene is one of the areas that I think is at the foundation of having good self-care plan. The other one is exercising, learning how to exercise. And it doesn't have to be that you go to the gym. You don't always have to do a rigorous workout every single day in order to have a good self-care plan. Maybe you do it, break it down into 10-minute increments throughout the day. The goal is usually to get 30 minutes in of workout or exercise at least 3 or 4 times a week, up to 5 times a week. But you want to get that in because you want to get the body moving. And Sister Clara is also probably going to touch on this, but workout is good stress relief, right? It helps you to think clearly. For at least for me, whenever I'm stressed or whenever I'm having issues, I put on my tennis shoes and go walking. I'll walk a problem out before I address it. Because by the time I get back, I usually forgot why I was so upset about the issue. And I'm better able to see a different perspective when dealing with it. The other one thing that I want to say is take your medication. If you are on medication, high blood pressure, diabetes, anything, heart medication, take your medication as prescribed. Don't decide to skip it or anything like that. That is part of your self-care plan because it helps to regulate the things in your body that you're having an issue with. Learning how to take the medication, drinking water, drink water on a regular basis. One of the guidance says that for how many ever pounds that you weigh, half of that in your body weight in ounces is what we should be intaking on a daily basis because our body is pretty much halfway made up of just water. So replenishing the water, the water intake and pushing out the toxins out of the body. That's what water does. It's helpful in pushing out toxins out of the body as well. Listening to positive music, videos, on YouTube, reading something positive, something that makes you feel good is also a part of what you can use as a self-care plan. Work and hobby. Work on a hobby that you haven't enjoyed in a long time. Picking back up an old hobby or a new skill. If you used to play guitar and it brought you a lot of pleasure, pick back up your guitar and start playing again. These are things that you can incorporate. Prayer and meditation. Meditation is a good way to start your day off. And prayer is another good thing. Not everybody is spiritual. Not everybody identifies with that, but whatever works for you, incorporate that into your self-care plan. Journaling on your feelings and your gratitude. Practicing gratitude. I practice gratitude at 3 at nighttime before I go to bed, the 3 things I'm grateful for. And then in the morning, I try to practice gratitude before I leave the gym. 3 things I'm grateful for. It's difficult to stay angry, frustrated, or irritated when you are practicing gratitude. I'm just grateful that I was able to fill my car up today. That's one of the biggest things I was grateful for today was being able to put gas in my car. Now it costs over $100, but I'm grateful to be able to do that. So it doesn't have to be something huge. It could be something very small to ourselves, but just learning how to be grateful and sit in that. Learning how to prepare healthy meals. Healthy meals go a long way with boosting not just our immune system, but also boosting the vitamin D, like from the intake of the sun, all of the things that we need to nourish our body, being able to put in healthy foods into our body, sugar and all these other things. I don't want to get too far into Claire's presentation, but those things are not healthy for the body. So we need to stay away from that. So preparing healthy meals, not just for ourselves, but preparing them with other people, the people that we care and love, can also be very helpful. Talking to someone you trust, talking to someone who is not a yes person, but someone who's going to give us another perspective on what we're going through that can be helpful. And not someone who is going to gossip and go and tell your business, because not everybody needs to know everything about you. But being able to have a trusted counterpart where that you know that you're going to get feedback that's going to help you move out of maybe the negative space that you find yourself in. Another one is practicing self-talk, good healthy self-talk and affirmations. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on a later slide. But these are all good things that you can incorporate into your self-care plan. And so what are some of the other things that maybe you're doing in self-care that I didn't touch on that we might want to share? Because it is important for us to share with each other what we're doing to take care of ourselves, because I might not have thought about it, but it might work for somebody else. So does anybody else want to offer anything? Nope. Sister Carla, what do you do for self-care?
So my issue is because all of this sounds great, but I can't really figure out time management to do all of these things. So I think that's my issue.
Okay, so I always say, what is it costing you not to do it?
What is
So
it costing me?
what is it costing you not to practice good self-care?
Well, I feel that it's costing me stress and anxiety because I'm not taking the time to do these things. So that's kind of expensive, I guess, for my health.
Yeah, it could be taxing and expensive if we don't set aside time.
Mhm.
So I often think that I can't afford not to practice self-care, because when I practice it, my day goes better, that I get more things done. When I learn how to step back from things that are not serving me well, and because I've created boundaries and intentionality around my life, then I show up better, not just for myself, but for other people. If we think about it like this, we always hear this when we're on the aircraft, is to put your mask on first, because you can't help other people until you help yourself first, right? So I'm not available to other people around me if I can't put my mask on first. Same kind of concept when it comes to self-care. If we don't learn how to take care of ourselves first, then we are not serving the other people around us as much as we could be. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes. Thank you. It does.
Sister Claire, did you want to say anything?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I was going to say someone added something in the chat too, that
Okay.
they volunteer by helping others.
Yes, volunteerism is one of the dopest ways to practice self-care, because when we do things for other people, it makes us not only feel good about what we've done, but it makes us feel good about ourselves. Thank you for that. Sister Claire?
Oh, no, I actually was going to say, take the comment from the chat. One of the things that I do is I make sure that I do meditation every morning, and I like to dance. It's something that happens when you are, music causes us to move, and the movement is a way to release a lot of the stress that can be built up in the body, and it can relax muscles. And so so instead of like stretching, which many of us kind of rob ourselves throughout the day, when you start dancing or listening to the music, even if you're bopping your head, you're beginning to release a lot of the tension that builds up in the neck and the shoulders. And so I know as females, a lot of us can relate to that. So that's something that I try to do as often as I can.
Mhm. Yeah, I have a really good friend. I'm not gonna call her out because I think she's on here. But I have a really good friend who likes to sing. And although she could use a bucket and still not carry the tune, that's one of the things that allows her to release stress, is that she sings out loud almost to every single song And that for her is a good way of releasing all of the energy that she has pent up. So I think that that is great. And journaling definitely helps us to get things out, things that we don't know how to say. And when I talk about journaling, I always try to remind myself to just free flow and not try to make it make sense. Not correct myself in spelling because I've gotten horrible at spelling because of autocorrect and all of these other things, or I could just use the microphone on my phone to create a text has gotten me lazy. So when I write, a lot of times I just free flow and I know that the word is maybe not spelled correctly, but I'm getting it out of my system. And then often I will go back and reread that and reflect on what I wrote. And then it allows me to get a different perspective. That's not as bad as I thought it was. This is another option that I didn't consider. So then I'll just start to brainstorm and free flow all over the place. And by doing that, I release a lot of what's built up. So that is helpful too. And then it gets me back to a place of mindfulness. Another thing that I recommend is meditation is wonderful if you learn how to also breathe deeply. Breath work is so good for self-care. And breath work means that we breathe enough where we fill up the belly and the lungs, and then we blow it out. So a breath work exercise might entail breathing deeply for 5 to 6 times, a deep inhale. And on the inhale, we hold it for 4 count. And when we blow it out for a 4 count. Because when we practice breath work, that it helps us to focus in on the air that is coming through our nostrils and then the breath that is coming out of our mouth. By the time that you get back to what the issue was that you started the breath work for, it doesn't appear to be as such a critical thing. So that is very helpful as well. So those are some of the things that I would also recommend, but it's not on the slide. Right. Anything else, Sister Carla?
So we have another question. It is around mental health. What can we do to end the stigma around mental health?
Talk about it. Normalize it. Normalize having the conversations. Normalize when we cannot deal with it ourselves is to seek help. We often in the Black community, I will say this, in the Black community, from all my studies, all my interactions, all my experience in the Black community, there's been stigma around seeking help for generations. And we often used to hear, at least in my household, what goes on in this house stays in this house. We don't tell anybody our business. And that creates some of the walls or the boundaries that people find themselves in and not willing to ask for help. Black people don't seek therapy. All we need to do is pray about it. That you just need to talk to Jesus. You need to lay it on the altar. Those are some of the things that create the stigma. And we have to tear that down. Talking about it in church. I know, at least for my church, my pastor talks about mental health all the time. Mental health and mental illness. Yes, it is good to pray. Yes, it is. For people who believe, let me just clarify that. For people who believe in prayer, it is good to pray. It is good to talk about your issues. But sometimes you need more than just prayer. You need therapy, you might need counseling, you might need medication. The same way that I feel like, this is my personal opinion, the same way that God made physicians for the body, he made them for the mind. And so when we start to normalize the conversation around mental health, we tear down the stronghold that stigma has on. Sister Clara.
I wanted to make a comment about that because education is what is so incredibly important to begin to destigmatize mental health and therapy. And the pandemic has really opened up, especially virtually, it has opened up the many communities, including the African-American community, to therapy. And I think that people are realizing more and more that therapy is a way for them to develop a connection that is a very strong emotional connection where they get to do a lot of processing of some really deep issues and as well as thoughts, and also develop new coping strategies. And so I think that the virtual platform has really began to open the door. And I would say that, we've made some huge strides in terms of like destigmatizing it. And because of the church, and I know that the Black church is very symbolic in our community. However, I think that even now we have our pastors and ministers and elders who are open to the concept. Many of our churches actually even have counseling services. So I don't think that, we are many, many years past the whole concept of like burying family secrets that cause shame and guilt and anxiety and depression. I think that especially the last 2 generations, we are embracing that it's okay to engage in talk therapy. And so I think it's just one domain that, it's like health. If you have cancer, you will have to see an oncologist, you'll have to see your PCP, you got to have multiple treatments. And I think that we're now embracing the idea that the therapy session is just one. And even healthy adults who do not have a diagnosed mental illness, most of us who are very high strung, very professional, very educated, who are multitasking and involved in work, career, school, organizations, we sometimes recognize that it is important to just have someone to talk with. And so it might be an adjustment disorder. So you may have a person that's new to a city who just got, like CEO or CFO of a Fortune 500 organization, and they need someone to talk with. So they may need to unplug from work and be able to just kind of like, decompress. And so obviously you don't want to call your mother and give her anything heavy. You don't want to call your father. And if you're like most of us, you don't want to go home and tell your husband because that's the time you have to shift. And so that's where therapists are trained and have the specialization so that we can help you with some tools that when you walk out the door, you're able to cope with, and you're not feeling so weighed down and you're not feeling so stressed. So I think we're education is our key. And I think platforms like what we have this evening will keep us kind of moving forward in that direction.
Right. And so, yes, so we have to continue to talk about it. We have to keep it as the forefront. We have to continue to say that this is a common conversation, that we don't need to stay in the dark. So I want to move on because this has gone a lot longer than I thought it would. And I want to give Sister Clara her space to go on. So I'm going to kind of just click through my slides, if that's okay with you. And because I know you'll pick up a lot of it on yours, Clara, so I don't want to belabor this. So some of the common distressors, I know you're going to pick up on some of them. Difficulty concentrating, anger and short temper, increased use of alcohol, tobacco, or other illicit drugs, a worsening of a chronic illness. If you have high blood pressure and it was under control with medication, and now that you see it going through the roof, that could be a sign that you're in distress and that you might need to see someone. So I'm gonna just keep moving here. We talked a little bit about stigma, previous trauma, maybe from abuse or assault, that could also weigh in on individuals not wanting to receive help. But also, we also have to look at how it is impacting our family, our friendship, our intimacies, and our work. You could be at work and get a bad evaluation That might be a sign that you might need to be talking to someone because maybe you need to, or you might need to revamp your self-care plan. Maybe you're getting stressed out at work because you're not taking time off to recharge or reboot. And I'm going to keep going. We do have a self-assessment. I'm going to drop it in the chat, but I'm not going to touch it right now because I'm going to give you the link and the resources where that could be a good starting place for you when you want to decide what kind of self-care plan you want to create. There's a more extensive list that is here that talks about different types of physical self-care, psychological, emotional, spiritual self-care. And then on the back side of there, it allows you space to start to write this out for yourself. So you can create your own self-care plan. And if you don't want to use the one that I provide, you could also go online and Google it. There are plenty of them out there that you can also utilize. Setting boundaries is also a critical part of self-care. Establishing boundaries is a great way to practice self-care because when we set boundaries, we create space for ourselves to take care of ourselves. Kind of what Sister Carla talked about earlier is I don't have time, but creating some boundaries around other things can create that space or that time for you to take care of yourself. State those boundaries to other people so that they know what they are. Because a lot of times when people don't understand your boundaries, they get frustrated because they think you're being difficult. Commit and preserve your boundaries. A lot of times we create boundaries and then we step back off of them. Don't try to do radical change overnight and say, okay, I'm creating a boundary around everything. Maybe small incremental changes are the ones that are more sustainable. And then assert your rights. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointment of others. Brene Brown said that. It's at the bottom of the slide. I love that because that creating those boundaries gives us the courage to take care of ourselves. This is other things that active advantages of having healthy boundaries. A healthy boundary is a limit, limits the space between me and the other person. It's where I start and where the other person ends. They are understanding of that. And then creating purpose for setting healthy boundaries is, of course, to protect and take good care of yourself. Here are some great affirmations I use for myself. Whatever affirmations work for you, I have affirmations on my mirrors in each one of the bathrooms. Those affirmations serve well. You're looking good. You can do this. No negativity today. These are different kind of affirmations that help to permeate in the mind. You affirm in the mind what you want to portray and show up authentically in yourself. And then you can get for challenges, short-term counseling and help. We talked a little bit about that for stress, anxiety, depression, grief, workplace problems, challenges in relationships, and emotional regulation. These are all good things that you can maybe step into counseling for and get the appropriate help. A licensed counselor, a licensed therapist is a good place for you to start. And not everybody needs counseling. Some people need coaching. So you have to discern which one is needed for you to get to that healthy space. Here are some great apps that you can also download. Shine, Calm, Breathing Zone, Happify. These are all great reminders for meditation. Sleep sounds are good ways to help you to go to sleep at night. Other things online are Better Health, Talkspace, Teen Counseling Pride. For people, you don't even have to leave your house anymore in order for you to receive therapy or counseling. You could do telemed, and you can do it on screen with your provider. So you have the options here that you don't have to always go in, be physically in someone else's space in order to receive the help that you need. Here's some other additional daily reminders. I'm only going to read the bottom one. I don't have to be a superhuman. I know when to ask for help. Creating daily reminders for yourself and reminding yourself to read through those can also be a great way to continue your self-care plan and maintenance of self. Here are a list of all of the references that I use and the resources. Like I said, they will be dropped into the chat box, and you will always use them for the self-care apps, the online free mental health screenings, Also, the Black therapists, you see those there. For employees who are for the federal government or any office, there's employee assistance. Just going to work and finding out what is available to you can be a great start place for your mental health. But also, if you have need for mental health services, you can always go to your job and see what is provided there. That's all I am going to talk about now. I want to lobby this over to Sister Clara.
Thank you, Dr. Haley. Wow. So if you guys are feeling the way I am, that was a lot. That was some heavy stuff. So I want to do something. I actually would like to start the next section with a 3-minute breathing exercise to help us reset. This is something that you can use at any time. You can start your mornings with this. You can right before, lunch, how you start feeling like really overwhelmed. Sometimes in the office, you can reset. And I think that my slides, that you guys are preparing my slides at this time. A 3-minute breathing space is what you want to create. It's a meditation. It's a time for meditation. The purpose is for you to step back, to unplug, to decompress, to disconnect 3 minutes, and to become present with the moment. So, sometimes at work, we may have like 3 projects that we're kind of juggling at the same time, and then we pick up that phone call. That's a great time to do a 3-minute breathing, to create that 3-minute breathing space. This practice will help cleanse your mind of any negative thoughts. It'll recharge your energy. Something happens when you walk in the room and there is an energy, there is an aura that you bring into the room. Immediately, you begin to change the environment. So the 3-minute breathing space exercise helps you just reset, recharge, reboot for a minute. It slows things down. So what we're going to do is 8:05. So we're going to each try the 3-minute breathing space. If you want, you can, some people like music to go along with it, but you're going to slow down. And you should just begin to become one with the moment, present in the moment, to be aware. So more choices become available to you at that time. So those of you who might be working on a strategic project or, are trying to manage a really complex task, I want you to remember, if you stop and you participate in the 3-minute space, there's a lot of clarity. You will find that you'll have a lot of clarity. You may have some ideas and opinions and some thoughts that would be recharged during that time. So this activity, the purpose of it is to bring yourself into the present. It's to and you should kind of be mindful of your posture at that time, especially as we're sitting at our desks in front of the computers. So if possible, you want to ask yourself, what is my experience right now? And you want to breathe, just pause. What are my thoughts right now? So I'm a cognitive behaviorist. Everything starts with a thought. If you're having a bad day, it started in your thoughts. If you're having a great day, it started in your thoughts. What are my feelings right now? So the feeling was originated from your thoughts. So this is a time for you to acknowledge and to just take account of your experience, even if it's unwanted experiences. Sometimes the experience that you're having right now is unwanted. So we got about maybe a minute and a half left. Now I want you to just start gathering, redirect full attention to your breathing. I want you to focus on your breathing. I want you to focus on each breath, outward and inward. So our breath, it functions as an anchor to bring you into the present moment. So a lot of times I tell my clients, like, be present. That's your homework assignment. Be in the moment. Be aware. There was a lot of questions about mental health and mental illness, stress and anxiety. Be present. Be in the moment. Be aware. Now begin to expand your awareness around your breathing. At this time, you want to be mindful of your sense of your body, a sense of your posture, sense of your facial expression. Are you frowning? Are you smiling? Your breathing space is creating. This breathing space exercise is creating this awareness. Okay? Now, step out of the autopilot role and back into reality. And then I want you to kind of, as you're stepping out, I want you to just do a yoga sigh. You guys know what a yoga sigh is? Exhale, yoga sigh. Who are my yoga people in the room? Something happens when you step out, step back into your sense of normalcy, and with the yoga sigh. So, hi, my name is Clara Marshall. I am a licensed practitioner. I'm with Spiritual Journey Counseling. I have over 30 years of practice in the field. I'm also with Fairfax County. We are seeing a lot of stress, anxiety, and depression over the last few years. I think the World Health Organization has pretty much proclaimed in HHS, Health and Human Services, that we are in our country has a mental health crisis at this time. So this evening, I'm going to just talk more about, so thanks, Dr. Carrie. I'm going to kind of just expand a little bit and talk about how stress affects the body, the mind, the emotions, as well as our behaviors. More importantly, I'm going to talk about how it has an impact on our physical health. And I think we saw a lot of that since 2020. So we have heard that stress can be defined as any type of change that causes physical, emotional, or psychological strain. Your body, stress is your body responding to anything that needs immediate attention. And it can affect us in different ways. According to an article from the Mayo Clinic titled How Stress Affects Your Health and the American Psychological Association in 2021, it was noted that even though we might not realize it, we blame a lot of the stress in our life. We blame headaches, insomnia, decreased productivity at work. We blame these things on other illnesses, but it is related to stress. In our bodies, stress can cause fatigue, tight muscles, constricted breathing. In our mind, stress keeps you worrying. You walk around all day, sometimes the entire weekends, in a fog or with a foggy sense of thinking, and you lose the ability to make sound decisions. Emotionally, stress creates depression, irritability, loss of confidence. Behaviorally, we may make poor choices. Many people over the last couple of years make poor choices when it comes to relationships because stress can cause you to lose clarity. You feel lonely. You feel like a needy. You want to attach. Stress can also create a loss of interest and a loss of appetite. So what do we do about this? What's the best way for us to begin to change this, how we are managing stress in our lives? We must change our situation. We have to change day-to-day life activities. We have to change the behaviors. So if you have to change what you're doing if you're changing your response to stress. This is a process. Sometimes it's okay that we've learned earlier from the presentation, we heard it's okay to talk with someone. It's okay to seek therapy. It's okay to seek counseling. It's okay to just take a day off, take a day to yourself, take a walk, exercise. These are just a few things that we can do to help us manage stress. How do we recognize the stress in the body? So I want you to just kind of take a look at this list. So there was an article in Managing Health and Coping during the COVID-19 pandemic from the Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs with Health and Human Services in May of 2022. And she cited that research is showing that many cultures are living at an all-time high with stress in their body. They have changes in their mood swings. They have digestive problems. They have insomnia. They have a lot of difficulty sleeping. A lot of people have reported to their primary care physicians and other healthcare practitioners that they feel anxious. They have headaches. They have low energy. So we know that a lot of this is related to stress. So we walk around with this high level of stress in our lives. Many of us are focusing on finances. We're focusing on family issues without day-to-day, without even recognizing it. We're trying to balance work-life scenarios. And so because of that, we have begun to normalize these high levels of stress. Stress is not always easy to recognize, but there are some ways to identify stress. Some signs are like anger, if you just short-fused, temperamental, irritable. If you have high blood pressure, if you have changes in your weight, if you're frequently finding that you have a cold. And so during the pandemic, there were many people who frequently found that they were diagnosed with COVID-19. Also, there are some of us may be just constantly worrying about things or having trouble remembering what we're supposed to do from 1 hour to the next. Those are just some ways to identify that you might be operating day to day with a high level of stress. So it's so important to pay attention to these signs that were mentioned earlier. So if you see a shift in your mood, or if you all of a sudden you're having more negative moods or negative thoughts than you've ever had before, and these negative thoughts is creating this energy that causes irritability, or maybe you're walking around feeling really guilty or frustrated or or short-tempered. Or maybe you're just walking around feeling pretty sad, because a lot of us had either direct grief or we had indirect grief or secondary grief since the 2020. Or maybe your mind is just overwhelmed with excessive burden. So it's so important for you to check your temperature, check your meter. And when you're doing this, you might want to just kind of focus on what may be causing your stress. Is it something related to work? Is it personal life? Is it, interpersonal issues? And it might be just competing demands. So the stress meter can, we each should be kind of checking our pulse or utilizing our stress meter from day to day, because we want to stop whatever you're doing. You may have to stop. You may have to do a day of self-care. You got to check what is causing the stress. Where is it coming from? And then you want to make sure you're not too close to the crisis zone, because that's definitely a day to unplug. You want to just kind of disconnect. And if you're in the crisis zone, it's important that you find someone. What is your plan? What is your plan of self-care? Who can you call? Where can you go so that you can unwind and relax? Stress can trigger a lot of strong responses in the body. And all of the responses are an indication that there is a threat. Your body will go into the fight, flight, or freeze mode. Your heart rate might speed up. Your digestive system might start getting all cramped up and everything. Your muscles might start tighten and, get kind of restricted. Your automatic nervous system can really shut down depending on what the level of stress that you're dealing with. So it's so important that you recognize the early signs of how you're feeling. So a lot of people say, oh, I'm having like a little nauseation, or one of the biggest ones that I hear a lot is the stress that we carry in our shoulders and our neck muscles. So that is that's the time you want to check your pulse. You want to just kind of assess where you are on the stress meter. So according to the American Psychological Association, we know that stress impacts our body. It can create memory loss. There's a strain on the brain. So your cognitive function is you're not going to be at your baseline. You're walking around in a fog, so you got to do a little extra in order just to make it through the day. You may have some heartache. That is also related to chronic stress that can increase your risk of heart disease, heart attack, and stroke. A lot of people go into their practitioner's office and they complain about heartburn, they complain about indigestion, they complain about they complain about anxiety. Most of the time they don't call it anxiety. They complain about panic. And so this is a time that the body is not functioning at its normal capacity. And in many cases, the body, you're in the fight or the flight mode. And this starts creating damage on the heart. And so practitioners might be prone to send you to see a cardiologist for EKG or EEG, or maybe some additional test. And so unhealthy habits we know can damage the body and create bigger problems. But did you know that stress can also do the same? So there are 4 types of stress. So here, this slide is pretty cool. It shows the digestive and the reproductive system and how this person is really overworking right now. And so she's more prone for stroke. Stress can cause bloating, gas, discomfort, and it easily translates to where you have like some kind of bowel issues. We know that when you all of a sudden you got a muscle spasms, could be in the back, could be the arm, could be kind of like that Charlie horse type thing. Anything that's like painful that all of a sudden came on. If you just kind of like stop for a minute, unplug, and you do the chain analysis, like you go back and try to figure out what precipitating factor just happened before you started having the muscle spasms in your leg. That is your trigger. Sometimes it can be people, sometimes it can be a place, and it also can be things. There are 4 types of stress, and this is what we know about them. So the House of Wellness, which is an online, it's an online trusted site, public domain site, has an article from October 10th, 2018 that talks about identifying acute stress, chronic stress, and episodic stress and uterus stress. So one of the things we know that we've seen an increase in, and so, as practitioners, they're seeing a lot of their patients coming in for conditions that are related to the episodic stress. Some of these things include rapid heartbeat, panic attacks, heartburn, gastrointestinal troubles, muscle pain, and tightness. What we know is this has been really running rampant since 2020. And this probably has something to do with the pandemic. It might be they're experiencing some grief, some loss, some trauma. They may be under a lot of pressure at work or home. And so some other examples of symptoms and signs are tension, headaches, migraines, hypertension, and heart disease. So how do we de-stress? How do we release the stress? How do we declutter our mind? Time management, talk with a family or a friend, talk with a coworker, implement relaxation skills into our day, therapy, take medications. Those are just some ways to cope. We know that stress and anxiety can cause cardiovascular disease, and those are stroke, diabetes, arthritis, cancer, and other respiratory diseases. So it's important that we begin to educate each other, and it's important to begin to learn to cope and begin to work together to fight some of the stress and anxiety that's in our lives. Other ways that we can learn to cope is that we don't want to fight stress. Many of us, we're thinking, oh, if I can just, I got to finish this project by 12 o'clock noon or 5 o'clock p.m. And so we start we put extra pressure on ourselves. That's fighting stress. Others have so when Dr. Haley asked, what is your self-care? Sometimes everybody is quiet in the room because there's this embarrassment, there's this stigma about stress, or maybe there's this guilt, I shouldn't be stressed, Sometimes we overthink it, I don't want to be vulnerable in front of everyone. And so we're not taking actions. But it is important that we begin to eat a balanced diet, exercise regularly, practice relaxation techniques, do some deep breathing, some meditation, muscle relaxation. I mean, you have to find a hobby. You have to pick up an activity. It could be yoga. It could just, you could be doing yoga in your own bedroom. You can do it in your own, recreation room. You have to make time to enjoy yourself. It could be spending time with your friends, spending time with people. It could be like having a laughter folder. I love this. One of my clients told me about this. So you find these YouTube videos and different things, and you find somewhere to unplug, and you go and you watch this video, and it makes you laugh for like 10 minutes or so. So then when you come back to your desk and you come back to your activity, you're so prepared. You have so much more clarity, because something happens when there's laughter. You can talk to your doctor, talk to a friend, and definitely talk to a licensed therapy or clinician. Remember, it's normal to feel stress, you guys. So it is important that we understand in our community, it is normal. We have to normalize. Stress is a part of our day-to-day lives, right? But we have to, again, you want to check where you are on your on your chart. You want to make sure that you're not in a crisis mode all the time, because then you're deregulated. Okay, so you're walking around and at any time you can just explode. Stress has to be a manageable condition for each person. And so one of the things that is like, we're fortunate about is that I might be able to handle, my temperature gauge might be able to go to 10 before I go into the fight mode. But somebody else might only be able to go to a 3, and they go immediately to the anger, explosive, and the fight mode. So you have to kind of figure out what's the best option for you. I may be able to do meditation and prayer, mindfulness in the morning and at night, and that may not be enough for another person, because our mental health is different. So someone else might have to do 3 30-minute daily exercises, and another person might be okay with just doing 1. But try to get regular exercise, because high levels of stress will place you in a burnout place. It places you in the category of burnout, but also in compassion fatigue. So if you haven't heard about compassion fatigue, I would really encourage you to take, just to Google that and look it up, because many of us are caring for our loved ones, or we may have lost a loved one. Or we might be in an area where we have been so detached, one, because of COVID, but also because, it's like we're very transient now. Maybe professionally, you moved to this area and your family's not in the area, and, not close by. So look for exercises, look for meetup groups. I think there's still a way that if it's a walking group or a yoga group or for golfing, that you can still do it and socially distant and keep yourself safe. Practice mindfulness in your life. So mindfulness to me is being in the moment. It's unplugging, it's being in the moment, it's being aware, it's letting go of some of that heavy stuff. And then I want to talk about, and then of course we can take caller any questions. And I know that the time is it's already about 8:30 p.m. So my last slide I want to talk about is love yourself first, and the world will follow. So basically, we hear so much about self-care. And what does it really mean? When clients come to me and I'm doing therapy, I say, what does it really mean? Now, what I do know is loving thyself is an expression of promoting self-love. It's promoting, your self-love. It is, it's affirmation. It's reframing and resetting your negative thoughts. It is so important. It helps you move through life. It helps you be able to get the things you want. It helps you achieve the goals that you've set for yourself. Now, I always tell my clients it means walking in the room. And one of my sorority sisters, who is also a licensed practitioner, she said it means pushing your way through sometimes. It means taking time for yourself and loving yourself. It means prioritizing yourself. So if you're going to be present in the moment, you got to love and prioritize yourself first. If you're going to be aware, you got to trust yourself and then be true to yourself and say, okay, wait a minute. She just triggered me, like something ain't right, okay? And it may cause you to be a little vulnerable, it may cause you to step back or even sometimes speak up. You have to be present. And then the biggest thing is you got to do some forgiveness work. And so, of course, as a practitioner, I always tell my clients, you got to do some forgiveness work. You got to forgive yourself when you aren't being authentic and true to yourself. See, forgiveness work, we think it's for the other person. I'm going to forgive her. I'm going to forgive him. I'm going to forgive those co-workers. I'm going to forgive the universe, right? But it's actually for you. The forgiveness work helps you let go of negative emotions, negative feelings, all those, all the young people now say good vibe, right? All those negative vibes so you can have a good vibe. So self-love, it's definitely to me the roadmap to self-care. So are there questions? These are some sources. I have additional sources. And so if you guys contacted, the committee and you wanted additional information from me, I would not mind providing some. Are there any questions in the chat?
So not a question, but someone mentioned when you were speaking on stress, they have increased appetite versus the loss of appetite in eating junk food when they're stressed. So I guess it was more of a comment.
So, I mean, absolutely. It could be either one. It could be weight loss. It could be the increase of weight. It could be the decrease in weight. It can be the increase in appetite and it can be the decrease of appetite. So it could be both. And a lot of times you'll find yourself like a yo-yo. Maybe late at night, you might not have may not have an urge or a sense of appetite for anything all day. And then maybe at 10 o'clock at night, you want ice cream or something before you go to bed. Or it could be that, like sometimes people say they have hunger pains because, there's a loss of, apathy. And so they lose that motivation and that desire to get up and get out and actually, whether they're preparing a meal or they go and pick something up.
All right, ladies, is there any additional comments or anything that you wanted to add? No. All right, well, I thank you all for joining our event. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions about this event or any future events. We will be sending a survey later, and I think you all should have received in the chat, there was a self-care assessment. All right, so if there's no further questions, I do appreciate you all, and I hope you have a good night.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.